This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by new Focus NXT herbicide from FMC. Focus NXT herbicide delivers a complete burn-off and extended residual control solution tailored for spring wheat growers in the black soil zone. See your local retailer today.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Hello and welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith. It is Friday, February 20th, and that's right, Shaun is away, so I get to host not just the show, but the issues panel as well. On today's show, you're going to hear from Kelvin Heppner and Darcy Pawlik with me on the issues panel. And of course, we've had breaking news today with the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court ruling against Trump's IEEPA tariffs. So we'll have a full breakdown of what we know, at least so far, and the potential impacts on that right after the break. We've also got a product spotlight today with Acadian Plant Health. And of course, as always, we'll have a bonus for you at the end of the show. So if you'd like to send your feedback, you can zip me an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com. Of course, you can, as always, call that feedback line 1-855-776-6147. You can text or leave a voicemail on that number. You can email me too. All right, let's take a quick break, and I'll be back with the Friday Issues panel right after this.
Although the cost per ton is higher, RealAg is cheaper per acre than MAP. RealAg is more efficient, therefore we use less fertilizers to deliver the same amount of phosphorus to the crop. On average, growers save $5 to $7 per acre, and RealAg has a demonstrated yield increase of 3 to 5 bushels, generating a $20 ROI compared to MAP. You can go to phospholutions.com and check out our grower savings calculator and see how much you can save on your farm.
It's now time for a product spotlight. Chad Yanchinski, the sales manager with FP Genetics.
A couple varieties I wanted to touch on quick. Cress AAC Hockley, big wheat variety that we've had here across Western Canada the last several years. Stands really, really well. Got a nice protein on it, really nice yield package on it. Phenomenal disease package on it. Goes through the combine really, really nice. And good sprouting tolerance on it as well. The next variety is SY Manus. A little bit more of a regional fit variety. We see big acres of it here in Manitoba, and then when you get into southern Alberta, into some of that irrigation country. It's a variety that really likes water. So short in stature, stands really, really well, and puts out the bushels, so it's got a really, really high yield potential to it.
Now, the other thing, you've got some additional resources from a staff perspective to serve some of the market.
Eastern and Western product specialists. With these new positions, really what they're focused on is bringing kind of that next level support to independent agronomists, to farmers themselves, and to the retail locations as well that are selling seed. So that's part of their job, is to really educate people on how X variety fits in this zone. They go to the fpgenetics.ca website.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. It is Friday, which means it's time for the Issues panel. I'm your host, Lyndsey Smith. Before we get to that, though, FP Genetics brings new seed genetics to Canadian farms, empowering growers to thrive in ever-changing conditions. Visit fpgenetics.ca and join thousands of Canadian growers who trust FP Genetics to deliver innovative, reliable seed genetics season after season. Experience the next wave. Head to fpgenetics.ca. Well, I lied to you, everybody. I said Shaun Haney wouldn't be here, but it's such a big news day. He is, in fact, here. Shaun, welcome.
I squeezed in.
Yeah, you squeezed in. It's kind of been a big morning.
Not here for long.
No.
But I've squeezed in.
Just this segment, everybody. But yes. Okay. Also joining us, of course, Kelvin Heppner with RealAgriculture out of Altona, Manitoba. Kelvin, you've got power. Yay.
Yes, we've got power. We had some freezing rain this week and then some wind a couple days later. So, quite a few farmyards in this area were without power for a good part of the day yesterday.
Okay. So, and rounding out our issues panel, we've got Darcy Pawlik. He's the Executive Director with the Wheat Growers Association. Welcome here, Darcy.
Thanks very much. Great to be here.
Okay, so let's just hop to it because we're still, I think, trying to wrangle all the reaction to the U.S. Supreme Court, of course, ruling against Trump's IEEPA tariffs. Shaun, I knew you couldn't stay away, so I'll go to you first on this one. Initial reaction, how do we sort of take this from a Canadian angle?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of things at work here. I think in general, my perception has been traveling across the U.S. that this is going to surprise a lot of people. I think a lot of people thought the Supreme Court was going to favor in favor of the president. The ruling was 6-3 against. There is a lot of questions in terms of how the refunds, apparently the lower court's going to deal with the refunds. It is going to be very complex and probably slow in nature. It does, I think it is a bit of a setback on the president's trade agenda and how they were using the IEEPA tariffs to, stiffly negotiate with a number of different countries, Canada included, the UK, Japan, South Korea, and others would be in that. I think a lot of people are going to wait to see how President Trump reacts and what Plan B and C is. No doubt there are other avenues to apply tariffs, not as flexible and immediate as the IEEPA solution, some of those other options, but we can get to that. I'm curious on how the other countries react. And, I was on AgriTalk this morning, and there's a bit of a sense that they think the countries are going to kind of sit tight. I tend to agree with Wiesmeyer on that. But there's going to be political pressure. In say, the UK is a good example where Prime Minister Starmer is really on thin ice as it comes to still remaining Prime Minister. People are going to say, wait a minute, they negotiated with us unlawfully. You need to push back. And he may be forced to be somebody that does that, but we'll have to wait and see.
Kelvin, this also, this comes just on the heels of some other economic data out of the U.S. that certainly points to your favorite word, inflation, and the increasing cost of most things. Tariffs, we know, are inflationary, so no surprise there. What are we sort of putting together as far as tallying up the economic impact of these tariffs and where this all lands now?
Well, I think that's part of what everybody's trying to sort out, and part of that has to do with the refund process that Shaun is alluding to. The U.S. coffers have benefited from these tariffs to the extent of $130 to $150 billion so far. So does all that money get repaid, and what does that mean for the U.S. Treasury? We're seeing the Treasury market or the bond market react largely negatively today to this news because of that, and the potential, the impact this has on the U.S. deficit. But yeah, in terms of giving some certainty, U.S. farm groups that are in favor of trade certainly welcoming this ruling, and I'm a little bit. I'm not sure I agree with Shaun's perspective that people would be surprised by this ruling. To me, this is the way that maybe I'm wearing my Team Canada hat here too tightly, but I expected the Supreme Court to rule this way.
I can see the band on your forehead. Your hat's very
exactly. Yeah.
Tis the season.
It is Olympic season also as well. So, but this doesn't really come as a surprise. If anything was going to rein in the White House and try to get some power back to Congress and say that, hang on, this is something that Congress should be dealing with, it's the Supreme Court. And sure, we saw three judges that are viewed as more conservative leaning rule in favor of, or as part of that six to get this decision through with the majority. So yeah, I don't know. Economically, this is another strike against the Trump tariff policy. And like Shaun said, there are other tools. There's Section 301, 232, 122, and 338, I think, are the four main ones.
Yeah.
But all of them are limited in scope, timeline, and could also be challenged in court. And like Shaun said, aren't as flexible or broad ranging. And so it's another strike, a major setback for the Trump administration's economic and trade policy.
Yeah, and I think it's important. This doesn't affect steel and aluminum. It doesn't affect lumber, and it does not affect also the fentanyl tariffs that the U.S. has on China. So it's 75% of tariff revenues, but it's not all of them. This issue doesn't go away.
Yeah.
And Canada and Mexico actually benefit less from this than the other countries because we were exempt under CUSMA, under USMCA, most of our exports. So we're actually not much changes for Canada because those Section 232 tariffs are still in effect on our steel, aluminum, and auto sectors.
Right.
most of our exports, and we'll eventually let Darcy talk here as well. But
I was going to say we also have another member of the issues panel, but to that end, so I think it is an important point, of course, that realistically the IEEPA tariffs in a lot of ways were, Canada actually fared okay under those, to those points, but we still have 232 tariffs, et cetera, these other forms, and exactly that. It is important to note that there are other avenues that the Trump administration can take. They're just slower. Some require research, some require proof of things before they're actually allowed to be put in place. Darcy, from your perspective, let's bring this into the whole CUSMA USMCA discussion. There are those that are calling this, somewhat of a leverage point for Canada, let's say, or Mexico, saying, this is one thing that now it's a club that Trump had in his hand, he no longer has. Do you think this factors into the review and renewal of CUSMA?
Well, thanks for letting me chime in. And I think the first thing you got to point out is research and proof. Lyndsey, the president wears Nikes, just do it. It seems to be his mantra when it comes to whether it's negotiation or trying to figure out what exactly they're going to do next. And I think there's something that we've probably learned is that it's not really great putting Trump into a corner. So although this is a loss, I agree. Let's not kind of push him into a place where he's going to get defensive and look for different leverage. The art of the deal is something that, so long as you read it, it does tend to be part of the tactics that he uses. So, around CUSMA, let's be careful. Let's be measured. Let's try to make sure that we have our own leverage. And I think through diversification and all the work that's being done, whether it's time in Mexico or otherwise, let's just use that. But let's remember they're our biggest trading partner and we should be cordial to our neighbors.
Mm-hmm. Shaun, do you think there is a risk that Canada gets a little too comfortable potentially with, celebrating this?
I think there's a little bit of puffy chestness. Mm-hmm. I do. I saw Dominic LeBlanc's comments, and it was because Canada has less of an issue with these IEEPA tariffs. He came out pretty strong in terms of what his statement was saying. This has been Canada's position all along that the tariffs imposed by the United States are unjustified. Interesting, he said unjustified and not unlawful. I thought that was kind of an interesting use of words. I think again we got with all that it relates to the negotiations with the U.S., Canada has to keep its eye on the prize and not get too caught up in some of the daily movements and things that are said. And I saw, for example, a lot of the pushback on things that Jamal Javani said in terms of how he described how Canadians are, I think he said, throwing a hissy fit. I thought there was a complete overreaction to those comments, to be honest with you. I thought, there was a good example of how it sort of proved his point in all this. And I continue to believe that Canada has got to keep its eye on the prize, and because this trade deal is it's so important. Yet I saw some data yesterday, 50% of Canadians would be okay if there was no CUSMA deal. What?
Okay. So
there's a huge disconnect.
Yeah. So
math is a problem for us, clearly.
Okay. So is understanding things. But yeah, so Abacus data. So David Coletto tweeted out yesterday, that 50% of Canadians are like, hey, fine, get rid of CUSMA. Now, again, we can always follow up with, do they know what CUSMA is? Do they know the economic impact, et cetera? I mean, but at the same time, it does capture, what people's thinking is. And I mean, I think you can infer that a lot of people would think, oh, it's a trade agreement. It means that, Trump can bully us and hold it over our heads. And eventually people get tired of that. At the same time, Kelvin, that was my next question was, should we be worried that 50% of Canadians, at least that answered the survey, seem to be able to take or leave the CUSMA deal?
Yes, we should. That is concerning. And I understand politicians are not in a spot where they can lecture Canadians on things that they should be paying closer attention to, that type of thing. But certainly we need to better understand what drives our economy in Canada. And I thought the last few years we had gotten a better understanding of that through this whole inflationary process, and that people were paying more attention to things that drive the economy, and hence why Mark Carney was elected Prime Minister last spring and that type of thing. But it seems we still got a long way to go if we don't understand that exports are important for our federal coffers.
Mm-hmm. Darcy, I mean, especially from your position in the West, representing incredibly export-dependent commodity and their growers, how important is it that Canadians understand just what's at stake here with the CUSMA deal?
You just have to listen to our ambassador from the U.S., Peter Hoekstra. I mean, he's said multiple times this rhetoric around, almost the visceral reaction to Americans. I mean, it's not helpful. Now, I don't know that they typically help the situation out themselves, but nevertheless, we've got some friction that really doesn't need to be there. And the whole politicization of this, and, kind of going back and forth, who's going to do the better job, and kind of pulling Canadians apart. And there is a lot of differences depending on the regions, whether it's auto and aluminum, sort of in central Canada. You've got lumber out, further west, and obviously sort of the major ag producing areas. Let's figure out a way to come together and get some unity here, because the stakes are very high. They're extremely high. So, I mean, CUSMA falling apart is not something that we want to entertain whatsoever. So anything that leads to, the negative perception and Canadians, misperception of it, we really need to do a better job bringing ourselves together.
And based on the focus on the auto sector, I really wonder, is Canada's biggest threat to having a trade agreement going forward may not be President Trump. It may be Premier Ford. Because he is in a real political quagmire in terms of one of the largest industries in Ontario, extremely under the gun, bullseye on it when it comes to whether it's the total USMCA review or sectoral negotiations as they've described it.
Now we need to take a break, but Kelvin, I wanted to hit on one point on this before we let Shaun go as well. The initial reaction from you was, okay, great, more uncertainty. And that is it. In light of CUSMA as well, we are still talking review and renewal. We could potentially, though, end up in annual reviews. Could we not? How much does the uncertainty factor, which seems to be chaos, seems to be where Trump wants to land? How much does that play in here?
Maybe that was my initial response. Just in the short term, though, it's short term uncertainty for hopefully longer term certainty when it comes to this tariff ruling. Yes, because businesses, importers into the U.S. are today dealing with uncertainty again about how they've shaped their supply chains over the last year, trying to adapt to these tariffs, and now these tariffs have been pulled out. And so in the short term, there's uncertainty. In the long term, hopefully it's better with this ruling for them. But yeah, there's uncertainty around CUSMA too, in terms of if we don't, there's been a lot of talk about letting it expire or the U.S. pulling out. This court ruling ties into that in saying that Congress has jurisdiction here. This isn't all up to the president. And so the U.S. withdrawal from CUSMA or USMCA is something that needs to go through Congress, not just the White House. And so it's not as easy as President Trump writing a Truth Social post and saying we're out. It's got to go through Congress. That's one thing there. And it could go into this annual review process, which, like you say, could lead to more uncertainty down the road. But I think there would still be some normalcy around having the deal in place and just knowing that it's up for review again this year, that kind of thing every year. It's something that I think we could adapt to. But yeah, uncertainty is the name of the game everywhere right now.
Yeah, don't be surprised because the White House sees value in the, hey, we're working on it sort of scenario. Don't be surprised if the review extends out through the entire rest of the Trump presidency, through the midterms and to the general election.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what's written in the agreement. If they don't reach a new deal here, it goes into annual review. So that is, politically, that could work.
Yeah, because we've still got 2.5 years of this administration, right? Okay, we've got to leave it there. Shaun's got to bounce. But today's show also brought to you by Oxbow, the latest innovation from New Farm, a versatile broadleaf in-crop herbicide powered by Duplasn technology. Oxbow is your workhorse on resistant kochia and other tough weeds. We're going to take a break here, and we'll be back with more of the Issues Panel right after this.
Questions about the markets? Sanoa by GrainFox is your AI grain market analyst, ready 24/7 to help you make smarter grain marketing decisions. Ask about market trends, pricing signals, basis, or what today's moves mean for you, and get clear, instant answers. Get a free trial and special savings at grainfox.ca/realag. grainfox.ca/realag. Ask Sanoa. Get an answer. Take action. It's that easy. Get started now.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's now time for a product spotlight with Koch Agronomic Services, and we're joined by Bryce Geisel.
So it really is going to depend on the source of your nitrogen, where you're applying it, how you're applying it, when you're applying it. All those pieces are going to have a huge influence, and there really is no one-size-fits-all. So if we look at the stabilizers, you can utilize a urease inhibitor like Anvil, and that's going to help reduce that volatilization losses of urea or UAN. You can use a nitrification inhibitor like Centurion. That can be used whether it's anhydrous ammonia, UAN. That help reduce that leaching denitrification losses. So those two pieces. And then there is the dual inhibitors and used to be able to help manage all three forms of loss. So a product like Super U or Tribune. Have a good understanding of what your loss conditions are going to be based on your operation, and then choose the product that's going to help that.
If somebody wants more information, where do they go, Bryce?
Absolutely. You can go to Koch, that's KOCH, agronomicservices.ca.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am Lyndsey Smith. It is time for today's product spotlight. I've got with me Dr. Andres Reyes Gaige, Technical Manager for Acadian Plant Health. Welcome here, Andres.
Thank you, Lyndsey. It's great to be back here in the program. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Now it is, I feel like the days are a little bit longer. Spring is just around the corner. Spring is, of course, an exciting time on the farm because we get that crop in the ground, but it's also potentially an incredibly stressful time for seeds and seedlings that are trying to get through sometimes not great conditions. Biostimulants are something that may be able to play a role there. What do biostimulants do at the seeding and seed window? Why are they gaining in interest from growers?
And that is a really good question because, as you know, the spring is always coming with a lot of different unpredictable weather conditions. So in many areas in the US, in Canada, all over the world, really, growers are having to plant earlier because they're trying to look for that good moisture soil conditions to get their crops out to a good start. So early in the season, we're going to see a lot of many different challenges, like, for example, cold soils, temperature fluctuations, we're going to see drought, and in many other cases, we're even going to see water logging. All of these different factors are really going to have a negative impact on crop establishment. Even more, all of these conditions are packed in a very short window of time when the crop is trying to really grow, and that early growth and vigor of the crop. So I think that is what's really driving that interest in biostimulants like our product. And that is because the biostimulants are going to help with different things, plant advantages, like germination, root growth, water and nutrient uptake. And all of these benefits are going to help the crops handle stresses a lot better and maintain that final yield potential for the crops.
So biostimulants certainly getting a lot of attention. What separates a product that really impacts early growth from those that maybe don't?
So it comes down to two main things, consistency and biological activity. Effective biostimulants like our Ascophyllum nodosum product are backed by more than 20 years of research and testing. Even more, our products are packed with many different bioactive compounds that are going to help the crop handle stresses better, are going to help with root growth, are going to help with water and nutrient uptake. And growers like seeing all these different benefits on their crops.
Now, you mentioned Ascophyllum nodosum. I hope I'm saying that right. It's really neat to learn about all these different different things that we can add during a growing season. How does this actually work? How does this biostimulant actually help a crop deal with early season stress?
So that's another great question. And products like ours, they help by supporting the plant's natural internal processes. So this is what's helping the crop maintain that maintain and protect that yield potential. So our bioactive compounds are going to help with that germination, are going to help support that early root growth, are going to help with that water and nutrient uptake. So you're seeing a lot of different benefits throughout the season that stack up together. And all of this helps really maintain that final yield potential for your crop. So that's how it works, really.
And so what do farmers typically see when they're using these products? How might a crop that has received this biostimulant look different in the season?
So farmers and growers are going to see a better germination. They're going to see a more uniform emergence. They're going to see a better root ball mass at the beginning of the season, a better root growth. They're going to see better nutrient and water uptake. And all of these benefits are really going to take the plant to be able to stand and tolerate abiotic stresses better. All of these benefits that we see early in the season are really helping the crop because they're maintaining that yield potential that your crop has at the beginning of the season before we even plant the seed.
Now, Acadian Plant Health, of course, busy working on what's next. Can you give us a hint on what else producers might expect from your company in the coming months and years?
And that is very exciting because Acadian has always been committed to helping crops and plants from the very, very first moment that they start growing. Right now, we have a really, really rich and great portfolio of products that can be applied to the soil, or it can also be applied by foliar applications. And right now, we are working on very exciting new seed treatment technologies that are going to help support germination, are going to help support that early root growth, and help support that early stress mitigation. So we're very excited about the future. And as you might know, Acadian is very committed to helping support the crop throughout all growing stages of it.
Now, for those who are interested, of course, in Ascophyllum, but maybe also what's coming down the pipeline, where can they go to learn more about Acadian Plant Health?
You can learn more about us at our website, which is acadianplanthealth-na.com.
All right. Andres, thank you so much for joining me here on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lyndsey. Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
All right. We'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio with Syngenta Canada. Go to syngenta.ca to find out more about their great lineup of products. We got Brad Garlow, he's territory sales rep with Syngenta in season. I know there is a product Syngenta's pretty excited about when it comes to new corn herbicide.
2026, we're going to launch Storn. The simple way of explaining it is pyroxasulfone added to Acuron. We're really trying to help growers that have a water hemp issue and a bluegrass issue. It's a great product, pre-emerge, early post on corn. You can add glyphosate to it if you go early post and kind of do a nice job. Acuron's been working really well for us the last few years, of course, and we're just trying to upgrade that for growers that are seeing this water hemp and bluegrass issue.
Brad, what is the biggest troublesome weed that your customers have to tackle?
I'd say my territory, bluegrass is definitely an up-and-coming weed. It's becoming more of an issue for most of my growers. The other one, Shaun, is sow thistle. A lot of my territory has IPs and some edibles, and unfortunately in IP beans and edible beans, sow thistle's a tough one to control, so we really have to do a nice job in corn and wheat and really attack that weed when we can.
Big thanks to Syngenta Canada.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. It is Friday, February 20th. It is the Issues Panel, and I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. Before we get to the panel, though, manage weeds early in your canola, cereals, and pulses with Conquer, Goldwing, Thunderhawk, and Blackhawk EVO, powered by Duplasm Technology, advancing the unstoppable power of pre-seed burndown with new fun. All right. Okay. I'm with Shaun on this one. Love the names of Goldwing, Thunderhawk, and Blackhawk EVO. Okay, there we go. Bringing in now the remaining panel. We have lost Shaun Haney, but we've got Kelvin Heppner, Darcy Pawlik joining us. Leaping off our conversation on the IEEPA tariffs, there's a few other things here that I want to just follow up with. We also got, Kelvin, I'll go to you first on this one. We did see this week the U.S. president marking glyphosate-containing herbicides and phosphate fertilizers as an issue of national security. And what does this actually mean? I mean, I think that overall people are positive about this, but it's also creating some friction. So what does it actually mean? Do we know?
That's good. It's something I think we're still digging into where this is actually comes into practical application in terms of the industry. But certainly we know when it comes to legal challenges and glyphosate use, Bayer has been under immense pressure from many court cases regarding glyphosate and its impacts, whether scientifically proven or not, on health. And in most cases, we don't think courts should be intervening on science issues type of things. So I think this provides some cover for it. Certainly the friction you mentioned with the MAHA movement, the Make America Healthy movement, Kennedy and Rawlins have been a very prominent duo in the Trump administration. And a lot of people in that movement are not fans of glyphosate. And so it's interesting to see the president take a stance on it in terms of putting some cover out for glyphosate use, and certainly a extremely valuable tool for modern North American agriculture.
Darcy, how do you unpack this one? Because I think, for those of us who want rules-based and science-based decisions, this is a positive.
Yeah. It's the position of whether it's industry or farm groups. I mean, keeping things science-based keeps it balanced, right? It takes the politics out of different discussions. So regardless on, which way the wind is blowing or what you might be hearing on the internet or otherwise, we have a system that people can participate in, investors can confidently put their dollars into, things of that nature. And so when this kind of comes full circle, and we really have to realize, especially for the Canadian audience, the U.S. is a very litigious natured system. And so if you don't like something, it is not uncommon to mire down that product or that brand or that company. Keep in mind, this started with Monsanto, which was at that time, and maybe still is, a nasty word. It sort of alleviates some of that pressure where it isn't really justified, because the countless studies that say glyphosate is safe, and you've got a big body of evidence that points towards it. But on the other side, you've got sort of that emotional, consumer-driven, this might be the reason that I have XYZ disease and whatnot. And it all comes to the fray. And, I lived in the States for a decade, give or take, and there's billboards all over the place, call this lawyer, call this outfit, we got your back. And, it's that ambulance chasing kind of background. So I think that this brings predictability. It makes sure that there isn't what would be an absolutely devastating precedent set for innovation in general and writ large, but in particular for the agriculture industry, which kind of suffers from that dichotomy of, like, do you talk about food, you talk about ag, how do you couch sort of the tools that are getting used? So, I personally see it as a very positive thing. I think the industry does as well.
Kelvin, just on this point, before we move on, I do also get a sense that this does provide some direction on securing domestic sources of these things, right? So does this potentially, right, like lead down the path of more manufacturing in the U.S.?
That's what I mean, where I'm not sure we understand the practical, or we need to dig further into the practical, what this means in the real world in terms of industry impact, and whether this means we will see investment in more domestic production or securing of domestic production, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Which
certainly looks like it.
Yeah, if the MAHA people are mad about people using glyphosate, wait till we make it. Anyway, okay.
Did you find it interesting they put phosphorus and glyphosate together?
Yeah,
that's the one I was like,
I don't understand.
Yeah, and that's where I think it really does actually, it's probably based more in the phosphate securing than anything else. And again, I don't know. I mean, we see this sometimes though, right? It's like we've got a couple different things that, hey, we'll pull them together and put them out there, and they're somewhat related, so let's go with it, right?
There is a legit food security argument.
Sure,
both
absolutely.
So,
yeah.
And that's what RFK was actually asked about it, and that was his statement, was something along the lines of this being about food security.
And let's face it, I mean, and Darcy, to your point of having lived in the States, I mean, realistically, there's always this sort of thin edge of the wedge kind of idea of like that slippery slope of if you outlaw one tool, does it create this, cascading effect of outlawing others? And at a time when, food costs are up and, farm profitability is down, et cetera, to take away a huge, huge tool like glyphosate, if that's where eventually you got to, that creates a whole other, series of issues that we're talking about, right? So, I mean, this obviously isn't one to one, but it leads us down that path. And so this sort of, brings us back to the science-based, or at least support for these products in at least for now, the short term. Also this week, though, Kelvin, shifting gears a little bit, we did have, and I know last week when I spoke to our ag minister, he was headed down to Mexico and then to DC. We did have the Canadian contingent head down, so we had businesses, we had government departments, all sorts, headed down to Mexico to meet with their counterparts. What, if anything, did we sort of see as an outcome from that trade mission?
I think a lot of the outcomes are going to be commercial in nature, more so, not necessarily public announcements. We did see some changes when it comes to apples and Mexico making recognizing some changes on the Canadian side, allowing for more apples to be exported from Eastern Canada to Mexico. In general, it seems like there's a huge appetite from both countries right now to increase trade and increase business opportunities. This, I believe, was one of the largest trade missions, if not the largest trade mission Canada has ever planned. So significant. It sends a message there too in terms of lead up to the USMCA CUSMA review in summer, and so I think on many fronts there were a lot of businesses, private companies that were accompanying the ministers from the Canadian government on this trip, and so a lot of, I think, the outcomes to get to that, to your question, Lyndsey, will be commercial in nature, not necessarily things we see in public. I did message a few people that were on the trip this week. They're actually still there. It's been a busy week, a full, I think, 5 days that they've been down in Mexico. So they said there is a huge appetite to buy more from Canada. Some of the main issues remain regulatory around red tape and things that the Canadian government could potentially look at changing as part of its red tape reduction efforts. As well, prices is still an issue where other markets around the world are in some of these products willing to pay more than what the Mexican market is necessarily. So that's something that needs to be overcome in this. So, but yeah, it seems like there's a huge appetite right now from both countries. And of course, this also provides some leverage and some unity in terms of positioning when it comes to the upcoming tripartite, trilateral negotiations with the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Darcy, when you hear something like, this huge contingent go down to Mexico and, they put on the table, hey, we'd love to do more, we'd love to buy more, putting price aside for a moment, to point out, red tape, it just feels like we're shooting ourselves in the foot at times. So I mean, how important is it that we get ahead of some of this stuff? Because this is supposed to be the government that said they want to get rid of it.
Well, maybe the best part about it is that it's not just internally within Canada that we're reminding them that, hey, red tape is getting in the way, that they do actually, and it's the royal they, right, the larger government contingent, they need to hear it from our partners. And, whether you're in Mexico or you're in Asia or Africa, you hear it and, hey, Canada, you've got a handful of hurdles that really tend to get in the way. Let's not forget one of the biggest bakers are there too, Bimbo Bakeries. And, they're quick to say they have the same kind of problems. They don't have the ability to store things like all your grains for weeks on end. They've got a 3, 5, 7 max days supply. So whether it's going to be labor, whether it's red tape, all these types of hindrances, getting that message straight from the source, I think that it pays dividends, and that alone almost keeps that value proposition of sending everyone down there. But making sure that the private sector is there, that is probably second to none. It's a lot to get everybody sort of the bums out of the seats and go on a junket for a week, especially. I mean, there's worse places to be than Mexico in February, so it is what it is. I know that they're working hard, so that's not to say that it's a vacation by any stretch of the imagination. But we also have to keep in mind, it wasn't that long ago that Mexico was sort of the anti-GM corn, and they also have some places where policy discussions should and need to take place, and they're in a larger context. So I don't know, I see this as hugely beneficial, and we need more of it, and maybe some more permanency to it is how I would end to it. We need those kind of offices that are located in, whether it's Mexico, South America, and all the big regions.
And Darcy, you pull out, a point of this that we heard from Parliamentary Secretary to the PM, Cody Blois, at the Kane event just, it wasn't even 2 weeks ago. Feels like a long time. February, it is the shortest, longest month. Anyway, but the point was exactly that, was for Canadians, for Canadian business, for Canadian groups, for all of our representatives to his point was get out there, go to the countries that the Prime Minister has gone to, where we've done trade missions, where we're signing deals or agreements or MOUs or sorting out some of the tariff issues. It's up to industry, business, etc., to get out and also exactly do those face-to-face meetings, have those junkets, do those tours, and actually make these connections and get it done. And so, this was on the books, of course, before then, but I mean, Kelvin, to your point, this was largely, yes, big government contingent, but a huge private industry and industry contingent to this, which I think is incredibly important and really interesting to see and likely what we need to see more of.
Yeah, and it's something that, to Darcy's point, establishing a presence there where it's not just a one-week junket led by top cabinet ministers, where it is a presence and relationships and all of that comes out of this. So I think it's great to see private industry, whether it's oat customers or beef customers, grain customers. Darcy mentioned the large baking company based in Mexico that has a huge presence here in Canada as well. Having those commercial voices in the room with some of the deputy ministers and the ministers you can solve problems that way. And when it comes to trade, and I think, hopefully that happened. We did also see new data from Stats Canada this week on Canada's trade numbers. I was just going to pull it up here. Our exports as a percentage going to the U.S. actually declined last year from 76% to 72%. So still significant, still massive to the U.S. But we did see exports to countries other than the U.S. rise 17% last year. So that's something the Carney government has certainly been pushing. It's real incremental at this point, but these kinds of discussions with Mexico in terms of diversifying trade and finding different markets is part of this whole strategy that the Canadian government is undertaking right now.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really important. Those numbers are really important because it drives home that yes, we can move product to other countries, but it also drives home just how important the U.S. market is for Canadian goods. I mean, there's no two ways about it.
No replacing that.
There is no replacing it, but we can incrementally move some things elsewhere. Okay, we're going to take a break, but before we do, a reminder, the Canadian Crops Convention is in Toronto this year, March 10th to 12th. This year's theme is Trade in Transition and includes a fantastic lineup of expert speakers and great networking opportunities. Check out what the Canola Council of Canada and Canada Grains Council have planned and register at canadiancrops.ca. All right, we'll take a quick break and we'll be back with more of the Issues Panel right after this.
And they're wrong. It's volunteer canola on the inside, followed by hemp nettle, flickweed, buckwheat, and narrow-leaved hawksbeard. This is one tough field, folks. But hold the phone here, because here comes Prospect Herbicide making a move on the outside and eliminating the competition one by one. And now, way out in front, it's canola for the win. With two powerful modes of action, glyphosate-friendly Prospect provides exceptional control of broadleaf and grassy weeds to get your canola off to the best start possible. Ask for it at your local retailer.
Co-op has been beside local farmers and ranchers for generations. With Western Canada's largest fuel network and a team of local agronomy experts, Co-op is built to keep your operation moving forward. With deep local knowledge of the factors affecting your farm, we're ready to provide trusted advice in the field and on the ground. Count on Co-op to support your entire operation from season to season. Co-op, here for your farm, here for your family. Visit your Co-op Agro Center to talk to a team member today.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. It is Friday. It is the Issues Panel. But before we get to that, with deep roots in agriculture, MMP's Ag Risk Management team helps producers protect their bottom line through smart, proactive risk planning. From AgriStability and AgriInvest to tailored private insurance strategies, MMP's Ag Risk advisors simplify complex programs and build customized plans that fit your farm. Strengthen your operation with confidence. Connect with MMP today at mmp.ca. All right, bringing in for our last segment of the day, although I do promise there will be a bonus, we've got Darcy Pawlik with the Wheat Growers and Kelvin Heppner with RealAgriculture. Okay, so this past week and last week too, a few announcements rolled out, a few articles rolled out, some reports rolled out, all around this question of attracting investment into agriculture essentially at every point in the value stream, right? So from startup and through to growth and through to, so seed funding all the way through. Darcy, maybe I'll start with you on this one. We saw, so at the Future of Food event last week, FCC announced that they had leveraged by coordinating. It's essentially, a group of investors that are putting upwards of $5 billion towards Canadian agriculture projects. And then we're seeing, of course, these other questions about, Canada. RBC's got a report out on that. Canada is very underfunded globally when it comes to ag tech. Where do we land on this as far as, is it just that we need more money, or is there something else that we need to be doing here to make sure that we're actually growing this part of the industry?
I mean, money always helps. Let's, just admit that you can do a lot of great things with a big enough bank account. But nevertheless, we just ended the last segment talking about red tape and regulations. If you're an investor and you've got, upwards of $7 billion to spend, I mean, you don't want to be taking on risk that might lie with regulatory decisions, paperwork, and I think that the Prime Minister has done a good job with at least talking about alleviating some of those kinds of constraints and those kind of worries. But nevertheless, actions speak louder than words. We haven't necessarily seen it. We've seen efforts like PMRA's latest and trying to get through some modernization not work. So, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. We're kind of waiting for it. So it's a big number, but nevertheless, it's got to be spent, and we can certainly use it. And sadly, we've seen a few fractionation plants, not make it. We're talking about a global marketplace that Canada can be sold into. So, we should always take advantage of that, but we should also learn from the jurisdictions that have had the pleasure, and the U.S. being our neighbor is probably the best example of that. They very much have this entrepreneurial spirit, and they also have one thing that I think we're really lacking and could really use to kind of propel this thing is sort of that base level market. We only have so many companies that are going to be there to mentor and provide that angel funding and be maybe a conduit for that new technology to take off on. So maybe I'll start with that.
Mm-hmm. Kelvin, so I have two things here. I think in Canada, and Darcy, I take your point, we are domestically a smaller market. Globally, at times, certain crops, certain things, we punch above our weight. But I do feel at times that we don't abide failure very well. Like we really knock on, and failure, unfortunately, is going to happen if you're trying to push the envelope, right? If you're trying to grow, if you're trying to put out something new, not all of them work, not all of them make it. And Kelvin, we're seeing evidence of that even just recently with some of the numbers coming out of some of the, let's say, startups or tech or AI that isn't maybe necessarily going to make it through.
Yeah, and that's always the challenging part, especially as we are or some people in our industry are looking to government to provide this funding. No politician wants to have make an announcement for we could point to a pea fractionation plant or a plant protein plant, and then have a couple of years later have it go through the bankruptcy process, that type of thing. There's certainly valid criticism for that, and so we're definitely risk averse, especially on the public side of funding. And there's a culture thing there too, I think, where there is a difference between the Canadian and U.S. markets, where in the U.S. it's more of especially you get closer to Silicon Valley, it's more of the go big and fail fast type of model, which we certainly don't have in Canada, and I'm not sure we have the culture for it. So some of this, it's a cultural study, I think, too, in terms of our risk aversion and that type of thing. And we don't have necessarily the scale, again. Agriculture, we do punch above our weight in terms of our contribution to the Canadian economy when in comparison to the U.S. But certainly, there are things around. I don't know. I'm not sure there's any silver bullet here, but there's a bunch of things around the edges in the RBC report this week. I think Canada West Foundation also had a report this week on growing investment in Canadian agriculture. There are a lot of good ideas in there that government should be considering when it comes to whether it's intellectual property protection and commercialization incentives at the university level. There's things they could do there to learn from other countries and be more competitive and continue to punch above our weight, and especially on the investment side of things. going back to your question, though, Lyndsey, we did see CNH, AGCO, some of the big players this week in their quarterly earnings have had some major write-downs for ag tech funds or ag tech companies that they've purchased over the last number of years. So whether we're talking Raven, Trimble, Monarch Tractor, some impairments there noted. So that basically means that these companies are acknowledging these assets are not worth what we said they were. And so it continues to be a tough situation in the ag tech market, extracting the value that people thought that was in these companies years ago. So it's a puzzle, certainly, trying to figure out what's next in the ag tech venture capital investment space. And Darcy's got some good insights into it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Darcy, it's one of my questions, because in the RBC report, they do sort of break down, the road to commercialization to, that sort of stuff, and the different sort of steps along the process and where you need funding and leveraging one to the next, and identifying maybe where we fall apart. And I would definitely say, I feel like we probably fail on more than one of those steps. But so, we're addressing maybe the seed money, but as you look forward down the value chain, are there other impediments to bringing something all the way through to growth? And then, of course, sort of setting things off on their own to be their own entities?
Well, it's kind of all of the above, and I won't try to water it down. But one of the things that the report noted, which I thought was kind of timely, and I don't think they did it on purpose, is saying that, hey, from a baseline R&D expenditure, we need an extra 36%. And this comes on the heels of a minus 15%. And obviously the discussion with what's going on with some of the research stations at Agriculture, Agri-Food Canada, for our sector, that's pretty big when you think of the sheer volume of employment and jobs and value creation that is going on coming out of agriculture. You got to start really scratching your head and saying, what is the strategy? What is going to be this next ag policy framework that takes us into the future? And I think that's going to be one of the venues that can address, like you say, a handful of the different things right from the start, from the research side of it, and maybe building that culture or de-risking it a little bit. And then as you get into growth, it's, I think whether we like it or not, we're going to be selling into the U.S. market. It's not just our neighbor, but we've got the most complementarity of crops, of technology, of general outset of how we approach adopting. We don't have the necessarily same types and sizes of farm. We're actually a fair bit bigger, but nevertheless, you still have enough similarities that you have to maintain those relationships. You have to have kind of that North America approach, and then from there. I think one of the things, if I can kind of throw it out there, is we really have to not aim for the status quo. So it always feels like we're always kind of coming in on someone else's coattails. We're like, oh, we hear, example in auto, EVs sound great, but we're like 10 years behind already. So maybe that's not a great investment. What are we going to do that can propel us forward? And we've got good examples. Canola is the old one. We've created a crop. But the pulse sector in the West is not to be taken for granted. Some of the companies that Kelvin just mentioned came out of Western Canada Raven. There's a huge manufacturing sector that's, I think, maybe a little bit taken for granted. And here at home in Saskatoon, we literally had the vast majority of the biologicals industry, and we probably just missed the boat on not doing enough with it. So, what's the next one? I'm not necessarily the expert. I know there's different things out there, but this is where we can kind of look both in the rearview mirror. Say, okay, let's learn from those things, those perhaps mistakes or just misses. It's not anyone's fault, but let's really be bold about the future.
So it's a really good point. The pulse one is one, a good point on the biologicals, but the pulse one is one that I really have a hard time sometimes unpacking as to, it's such a great product. We do such a great job growing it. Yes, there are some agronomic challenges, et cetera. And we sell them around the world, absolutely, but we cannot seem to make a fractionation or processing company work. Kelvin, we don't have much time here, but has anyone sat down and pulled some of these threads together and said, here's where we just can't seem to get past?
I'm not sure it's as simple as that. Again, it's a complicated situation, and I think in some ways we, like Darcy said, we aim for the status quo. We're comfortable, and so we often don't take risks, don't take chances that unlock new opportunities kind of bring us to that next level. But we're just comfortable where we are in many cases, I think. And this is maybe a broader statement on Canadian society right now, but it kind of, I'm not sure that there is a certain specific regulation or change in something policy-wise that would just unlock it and make it work.
Unless it's hockey. We don't seem to go for gold. So
well, even there. But even there, we're going to probably...
Kelvin. It's a wound. You're already picking at a scab. Okay, we've got to end it there. That's all the time we've got for the Issues Panel today here on Real Radio. But of course, stick around. If you've downloaded the podcast or are listening on YouTube or wherever you get your audio, there is a bonus segment. Kelvin, have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. Take care, all.
And Darcy, thanks so much for joining us on the Issues Panel. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right, we'll talk to you Monday, everybody. Cheers.
Thank you for downloading this RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by new Focus NXT herbicide from FMC. Focus NXT herbicide tackles the toughest weeds, including wild buckwheat, volunteer canola, wild oats, and sow thistle, with simplicity and confidence. See your local retailer today.
Welcome to the bonus, everybody. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. We still don't have a Shaun Haney, and that's great. We can make fun of him. Just kidding. Okay, Kelvin Heppner, Darcy Pawlik. Kelvin, I'll start with you. Here we are in the bonus. What did we not talk about in the show today? What did we miss?
Well, we ended talking about referencing hockey, and I know hazing is frowned upon, but we've known Darcy well for a long time, and I didn't realize this was Darcy's first time on the Issues Panel. So I feel like this, we'll call it special rookie treatment, didn't go far enough today.
That's probably true. We asked really smart questions and he had smart answers, and I feel like that was not a good enough rookie showing. You should have sworn at least once, Darcy. It is true. And thanks for joining us. We really do appreciate it. And it's a lot of fun. Otherwise, Kelvin, what else did we miss?
Oh, I have to have a serious answer here?
Well, I mean, I can go to Darcy first. Yeah.
Yeah, go to Darcy first. There's a lot of things that happened this week.
Yeah, Darcy, what did we miss? What did we not talk about on the Issues Panel?
I don't know. There's a lot of people descending on Ottawa. I was listening to the show yesterday, and you got a various smattering of answers. I'm kind of curious what you guys are thinking are the top things going into ag policy framework.
Yes. Okay. I like it. So good point. Next week is the CFA AGM, and of course, so many groups and so many, build out their MP meetings and their time on the Hill around that meeting as well. And at the meeting, and I'll be there Tuesday, they are having an entire workshop about the next policy framework, in the morning on the Tuesday. It is a good question as to where we sort of, Kelvin, do you get a sense of are we starting with a clean slate, or are we starting with take the existing and minus plus? Do we have a sense of where we're even starting from?
I think it's going to be, I know our friend Tyler McCann would say we never shouldn't miss a crisis as I forget the exact saying, but you got to turn a crisis into an opportunity. And I don't know, it's feeling like there's so many different opinions on what this should look like that we're going to end up starting from the same spot and tweaking it again is I think the most likely outcome, and ending up with something quite similar.
So, I mean, we also have to sort of unpack, there's the federal side, which is our like large national programs, the federal, provincial shared programs. And then we have like our funding programs. Now, those, I think, that's where I think like our funding. So I mean things like the off-CAF and like those sorts of things that.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I mean,
there will be cuts.
There's going to be
cuts on that side of things. And we've certainly seen the change in government priority away from carbon neutral, net zero, all of the language that was top billing always in everything from the Trudeau government. Carney government has moved on from that. So there, I think off-CAF and some of the sustainability program stuff will definitely have less funding for it, or it will be put into a different type of framework or description or outcome tied to it type of thing. So yeah, there will probably see some uncertainty. And there's actually, that's maybe an answer to my question. We had an interview posted on RealAg this week with Shaun Catherwood, who works in Saskatchewan with farmers trying to navigate incentive programs. And he talked about how there's 67 different incentive programs for prairie farmers to consider right now and navigate if they're looking to unlock additional revenue. In most of these cases, it's not significant revenue. It's about about kind of a tipping point, a practice you're maybe already considering and participate in a program to unlock that additional value. But certainly it's already a complex environment. And OFCAF, the On-Farm Climate Action Fund, is the program that kind of overshadows everything. It's the massive federal program, and it's facing only one more growing season after this year. 2020, March 2028 is when it expires. And yeah, to your question, Lyndsey, that's one maybe the most predictable change when it comes to the new ag policy framework.
I do want to put out, so because under those side, like under some of these cost share funding programs, I looked into one of them just recently, and what was fascinating, so it was for processing. What was fascinating is you were eligible for less money if you were focused on the U.S. market. So I found that very interesting that was a change that was slid in there.
Yeah, food security though will be part of this. Like that's something
economics
coming out of the Future of Food event last week too, or in Canada's Ag Day. A lot more, and Darcy alluded to whether we're in the food business or agriculture business, and those how we relate to that. I think there's going to be more of an emphasis on food in this policy too, food security, and that comes with all kinds of complications and unintended consequences potentially too when it comes to limits like that. Where if we're talking food security, well, you got to be selling to Canadians, not to Americans. Well, that's pretty restrictive then in terms of trying to attract investment and scale up and that type of thing.
Darcy, do you have a wish list?
I think I'm going to stay away from my wish list, but two things that I'd love to see incorporated into them is a better baseline. So we kind of lack true freedom to operate in Canada, and I think it stems from a lack of understanding. And for the hundreds of events that you go to, they tend to end with, we got to tell our story better. We have to do a better job. I'd like to see something that really helps that along. Agriculture in the classroom is, I think, a really good example of making sure that people have an understanding where their food comes from. So it is ag and food starting to get tied together. If we can do a better job of that, I think that the whole industry benefits and all the programs benefit. And the second thing that I don't think we saw it come through, like I didn't mind some of the wording of the previous ag policy framework of driving innovation. They kind of couched a few other pillars in there around sustainability and climate change, which are more tactical in my mind. They need a good set of key performance indicators, good KPIs that we can kind of draw upon to have a dashboard and say, yeah, we are increasing productivity. We are increasing the value that we're exporting. We can increase the competitiveness of the sector. We can get those two things. Everything else, I think, will fall out pretty positively.
So what would those be? Because in the last framework, it would have been carbon emissions, would have been
and
the
that
KPI.
was pretty much the only one. Yeah,
top priority for the government.
Yeah,
for the federal government. But what would they be? How do you measure those things, Darcy?
Well, they can fall underneath. Like without an economy, you can't invest in technologies or what have you that can actually get to that endpoint. So I mean, they just kind of did it, a little ass backwards. There's your, you wanted a little nuance for you. Throw that in there, and that's just business 101. So it's like, let's just take some practical tools that are already being used. If you use Kinsey as a consultancy, they do this day to day. So it's like, use the kind of great advice that's very expensive, but it works,
Sorry, Lyndsey, I just had one other point responding to what Darcy said before about education and investing in ag in the classroom. We've often thought about the importance and value of having people understand agriculture from like a political sense, where it's they're influencing policies and how we farm, that type of thing, in terms of having informed voters and how important that is. But I also think, and I think the RBC report alluded to that this week, from an investment perspective, in terms of attracting investment dollars, you need the people that make the decisions around how investments are made at the pension funds, at the venture capital funds, to also understand agriculture and how do we translate the complexity of our industry and how niche a lot of these enterprises are and business operations are. How do you translate that into effective stories for that investors, the people controlling the purse strings, understand? There's also an investment perspective there too, in terms of the benefit, unlocking value for agriculture when it comes to helping people understand our sector.
And these
it's a major
things,
barrier.
It is, and these things can sometimes be in friction, right? Because if we're going to talk about food security, that's not maybe the same as productivity, right? Because sometimes if you're solely focused on food security, you might give up some things to make sure that you actually are producing things that maybe we could buy cheaper elsewhere, but you value them in your own backyard. That's an inefficiency. That isn't necessarily a productivity component, but as a society, we're valuing it. And so we're willing to make that trade-off. I do think on the KPI side, and for everybody who loves key performance indicators, I mean, there are things we can measure GDP growth or attached to the sector. We can measure startups. We can measure,
productivity. Just mentioned it.
Yeah, exactly. Like productivity.
Good
like
one.
there are so many things that we can. And to Darcy's point, and I think that this is the one that in so much messaging is that if you create the productivity, the income, when everyone is actually making more money and being more efficient, that means that there's more money to go around to do other things, right? So like this is where I think Canada really sort of lost its way in a lot of these things, was it was so focused on spending the money and forgot that we had to make it first. And so what is the saying that eventually, well, I think it's Margaret Thatcher, and I can't believe I'll quote her, but it's like eventually you run out of other people's money. This is the thing, right? Is that like at some point we know that as a sector, and this and Lisa Ashton, I'm coming for you because I really want to get her to talk about this RBC report. One of the things that they identify is that like yes, we're underfunded, but you have to invest to then grow. And then you can do other things, right? So like it's an important part of the whole discussion. And that Canada really, our Canadian ag sector globally falls way behind on performance. And that I think is the key, that like we are capable of doing so much more culturally. And I've talked about it before on the show. I have my own frustrations because I do think sometimes we're just not bold. We're risk averse. And we really need to sort of allow people to have big ideas and not, pull the rug out from under them, because I think we sometimes do that. And also we have to allow things to fail. Like we have to be able to take a risk and not, and here you go, Darcy, not shit on them for failing. Because if you're always successful, you're probably not actually pushing very far, right? You're probably not pushing anything.
How else do you learn?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is part of it. And why is it okay to be disappointed with getting a silver like yesterday when, I think as a society, we should be competitive and we should want these things. And, Lisa and what RBC is doing is a great example of, it's kind of a continuation of the countless reports giving us similar, if not the same advice for how to improve. It's like, all right, it's time to just start listening to it and start actioning it, right? Actions speak louder than words.
I have a column half written about that we need to show, not tell. So maybe I'll get to it this afternoon. We need to show action and do our things. Okay, let's leave it there. Darcy, great skate today on the rookie lap here. You did well. Congratulations. Kelvin, next time I expect more out of you. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. Thank you all. And of course, thanks to everybody listening on the podcast. We really appreciate it. Watching us on YouTube. I will be back Monday for Agronomic Monday. Darcy, Kelvin, have a wonderful weekend. Thanks.
You too. Stay warm.